Weakness is not merely a lack of physical strength or an inability to win in confrontation. It is something much deeper and more pervasive. It is a psychological state, a way of being that is evident in the way a person carries themselves, the way they speak, the way they interact with others, and how they respond to challenges. People, especially women, are highly attuned to these cues, and they can recognize weakness almost immediately. It does not need to be explicitly stated. It is something they feel, something they sense in an instant. A weak man is one who lacks confidence in himself, who is unsure of his place in the world, who hesitates instead of taking decisive action. This hesitation is a red flag, an indicator that he has not yet developed the necessary internal structure to withstand the pressures of life. He may seek approval from others to compensate for his lack of self-assurance, but this only reinforces the perception of weakness. People can tell when someone is desperate for validation, when their self-worth is dependent on external affirmation rather than being rooted in something deeper. Women in particular have had to develop an acute awareness of male strength and weakness throughout history. Their survival and the survival of their children has often depended on choosing the right kind of men. Men who are strong enough to provide stability, to endure hardship, to stand firm when faced with difficulty. This is not merely a cultural construct, it is something deeply ingrained in human psychology. If a man signals weakness, through his posture, his voice, his lack of decisiveness, he is immediately categorized as someone who cannot be relied upon. This does not mean that women consciously evaluate men in these terms, but rather that they respond to these signals instinctively, often without even realizing it. The tragedy for many men is that they do not even realize when they are projecting weakness. They may think that by being excessively agreeable, by avoiding conflict, by always putting others first, they are demonstrating virtue. But in reality, what they are demonstrating is a lack of backbone. They are showing that they are afraid to assert themselves, afraid to stand their ground, afraid to risk rejection or confrontation. This does not inspire respect, it breeds contempt. A man who cannot say no, who cannot establish boundaries, who bends to the will of others too easily, is not seen as kind, he is seen as weak. Weakness manifests in many forms. It is in the man who constantly complains but does nothing to improve his situation. It is in the man who blames others for his failures instead of taking responsibility. It is in the man who seeks constant reassurance because he does not trust his own judgment. It is in the man who reacts emotionally to every small challenge, who cannot control his temper, who allows himself to be ruled by impulse rather than discipline. All of these things signal instability, and instability is the opposite of strength. People respect those who are capable of standing firm in the face of adversity. They respect those who have a sense of direction, a mission, a clear purpose. A man who does not know where he is going, who drifts aimlessly through life, is inherently weak because he is unmoored, untethered, lacking the internal foundation that provides resilience against the chaos of existence. Women in particular are repelled by this because it signals uncertainty, and uncertainty is not a trait that inspires confidence or security. A weak man is also one who cannot control his emotions. He is reactive rather than proactive. He allows his fears, his insecurities, his frustrations to dictate his actions. Instead of mastering his impulses, he is ruled by them. Instead of facing difficulties with courage, he seeks to avoid them, to escape, to find the easy way out. This is a profound sign of weakness because it demonstrates an inability to confront reality head-on. Strength, in contrast, is the ability to endure hardship without being consumed by it. It is the ability to regulate one's emotions, to act with discipline rather than react with impulse. Another key indicator of weakness is passivity. A man who waits for life to hand him opportunities instead of going out and creating them is demonstrating weakness. A man who allows others to dictate the course of his life rather than taking control himself is demonstrating weakness. A man who avoids making difficult decisions because he fears making the wrong choice is demonstrating weakness. Passivity is not neutrality, it is surrender. It is an abdication of responsibility. It is a failure to take ownership of one's life. Weak men often believe that by being passive, by going with the flow, by avoiding conflict, they will earn the approval of others. But in reality, they achieve the opposite. People do not respect those who refuse to stand for anything. They do not admire those who are too afraid to assert themselves. They do not value those who are constantly seeking validation rather than demonstrating self-sufficiency. One of the worst forms of weakness is self-pity. A man who constantly sees himself as a victim, who believes that the world is against him, who blames his circumstances rather than taking responsibility, is weak. He has given up before even trying. He has allowed himself to be defeated not by external forces, but by his own mindset. No one respects a victim mentality. People respect those who take ownership of their lives, who refuse to let obstacles define them, who push forward despite difficulties. Many men do not realize that their own behavior is reinforcing their weakness. They engage in self-destructive habits, they surround themselves with negative influences, they indulge in distractions rather than facing reality. Strength is built through discipline, through consistency, through taking on responsibility even when it is difficult. Weakness, on the other hand, is the result of avoiding responsibility, of seeking comfort over growth, of refusing to confront the difficult truths about oneself. The most dangerous thing about weakness is that it feeds on itself. The weaker a man allows himself to become, the harder it is to break free. He falls into patterns of avoidance, of procrastination, of self-doubt. Every time he fails to assert himself, every time he avoids a challenge, every time he seeks the easy way out, he reinforces his own weakness. It becomes a cycle, a downward spiral that only gets worse over time. Breaking free from this requires a fundamental shift in mindset. It requires recognizing that strength is not something that is given, it is something that must be earned. It requires understanding that no one is coming to save you, that no one will hand you confidence or respect. It must be built day by day through actions that demonstrate discipline, resilience, and competence. A man who is psychologically weak cannot hide it. It will manifest in everything he does, in every interaction, in every decision. It is visible in his body language, in his tone of voice, in the way he carries himself. People will see it and they will react accordingly. Women in particular will be repelled by it because it signals a lack of stability, a lack of direction, a lack of the very qualities that they instinctively seek in a man. Strength is not about dominance or aggression. It is about presence. It is about being someone who is in control of himself, who does not waver in the face of difficulty, who does not crumble under pressure. It is about being a man who others can rely on, who others respect, who commands attention not through force, but through sheer competence and confidence. A man who is psychologically weak will always struggle in life. He will struggle in his relationships, in his career, in his personal growth. He will always be at the mercy of external circumstances rather than being the master of his own fate. The world does not reward weakness. It does not cater to those who refuse to take responsibility. And until a man recognizes this fundamental truth, he will continue to be overlooked, dismissed, and disrespected. Real strength is not simply a matter of physical power, nor is it about being domineering or forceful. Strength, in the most meaningful sense, is the ability to take on responsibility, to control one's emotions, and to develop the competence necessary to navigate the world effectively. It is not something that can be faked, nor is it something that can be given. It must be built, and it must be earned through effort, discipline, and self-mastery. Women, and people in general, are exceptionally good at recognizing when someone possesses real strength versus when someone is merely pretending. There is something in the way a person carries themselves, in the way they respond to challenges, in the way they engage with the world, that reveals whether they are truly strong or simply trying to project the illusion of it. Competence is the foundation of real strength. It is the ability to do things well, to develop skills, to master one's environment. A man who lacks competence in key areas of his life will inevitably feel weak, and that feeling will be projected onto the world. People, especially women, can sense this. They can tell when a man is incapable of handling responsibility, when he does not have the ability to provide stability or direction. Competence is attractive because it signals that a man can handle the demands of life, that he has the ability to solve problems rather than be overwhelmed by them. It is not enough to simply desire respect or admiration. Those things must be earned by demonstrating capability, by showing that one has put in the time and effort to develop mastery in important areas. Responsibility is another core element of real strength. A man who avoids responsibility, who shies away from challenges, who refuses to take control of his own life is inherently weak. Strength comes from embracing responsibility, from taking ownership of one's actions and circumstances. This does not mean that life will always be fair or that every situation will be within one's control, but it does mean that the way one responds to difficulties is entirely within their control. A strong man does not make excuses. He does not blame others for his failures. He does not retreat into self-pity or wait for someone else to fix his problems. He takes action. He recognizes that responsibility is not a burden but an opportunity. It is the opportunity to shape one's destiny, to build something meaningful, to become someone who others can rely on. Emotional control is just as important as competence and responsibility. Many people mistakenly believe that being emotional is a sign of authenticity, that expressing every feeling without restraint is somehow a virtue. But the truth is that emotional instability is a sign of weakness. A man who cannot regulate his emotions, who reacts impulsively to every challenge, who allows anger, frustration, or insecurity to dictate his behavior, is not in control of himself. And if a man cannot control himself, how can he possibly control his circumstances? How can he lead? How can he be trusted to handle difficult situations with wisdom and composure? Strength is the ability to remain calm under pressure, to think clearly even in the face of adversity, to act with intention rather than react out of fear or frustration. A strong man understands that life is full of hardship, that suffering is inevitable, but that the way one responds to suffering defines their character. A weak man is easily broken by hardship. He crumbles under pressure. He loses faith in himself. He becomes bitter and resentful. A strong man, on the other hand, endures. He does not allow difficulty to defeat him. He learns from pain. He adapts. He becomes stronger because of it. Women, whether they realize it consciously or not, are drawn to this kind of resilience. They want to know that the man they are with is capable of withstanding life's difficulties without falling apart, without losing his sense of purpose, without becoming someone who needs to be saved rather than someone who can offer security. Kindness is often misunderstood as a form of weakness, but the reality is that kindness from a place of strength is one of the most powerful traits a man can possess. A weak man who is kind is not truly kind. He is compliant. He is agreeable because he fears conflict, because he seeks validation, because he does not have the strength to assert himself. This kind of kindness is not admirable, it is submission. It is a desperate attempt to be liked rather than a genuine expression of goodwill. A strong man, on the other hand, is kind because he chooses to be, not because he has to be. His kindness is not a result of fear but of confidence. He is kind because he understands that true strength is not about domination or cruelty, but about the ability to help others without being taken advantage of. This distinction is crucial because people can tell the difference between someone who is kind because they are afraid and someone who is kind because they are secure in themselves. Women, in particular, respect men who are kind from a position of strength. They respect men who can be compassionate without being weak, who can be understanding without being passive, who can be patient without being submissive. It is a fine balance, but it is one that must be mastered. A man who is too aggressive, too domineering, too unwilling to show any warmth is not respected, he is feared. And fear does not inspire loyalty or admiration. At the same time, a man who is too passive, too eager to please, too unwilling to stand his ground is not respected either. He is dismissed. Strength is about knowing when to be firm and when to be flexible, when to be compassionate and when to be unyielding. Another important element of real strength is the ability to set boundaries. Weak men allow others to walk all over them. They do not stand up for themselves. They do not enforce their standards. They tolerate behavior that they should not tolerate. This is a profound sign of weakness because it signals a lack of self-respect. A man who respects himself does not allow others to mistreat him. He does not tolerate dishonesty. He does not allow himself to be used. He does not accept disrespect. Women, whether they admit it or not, test men for this. They push boundaries. Not necessarily because they want to break them, but because they want to see if the man will stand his ground. They want to know if he is someone who has a backbone, someone who values himself enough to demand respect. If a man fails this test, if he allows himself to be pushed around, if he lacks the courage to assert himself, he loses respect. Strength is also about consistency. It is not enough to be strong in moments of convenience. True strength is demonstrated through persistence, through the ability to maintain discipline even when it is difficult. A man who starts strong but then gives up at the first sign of difficulty is not truly strong. Strength is endurance. It is the ability to keep moving forward even when the path is unclear, even when the obstacles are overwhelming. It is the ability to hold oneself to a high standard, to refuse to settle for mediocrity, to continue striving for excellence even when no one is watching. This kind of consistency builds character, and character is what defines a person's true strength. People respect those who have proven themselves over time. They respect those who do not waver in their values, who do not change their principles for the sake of convenience, who remain true to themselves despite external pressures. Women respect men who have this kind of stability because it signals reliability. A man who is emotionally erratic, who is easily swayed by circumstances, who lacks the discipline to stay true to his commitments, is not someone who can be depended upon. And dependability is one of the most important traits that women look for in a man, even if they do not articulate it explicitly. Real strength is not about pretending to be tough or projecting an image of dominance. It is about having the competence to navigate life effectively, the responsibility to take control of one's circumstances, the emotional discipline to remain composed under pressure, and the consistency to maintain high standards over time. It is about being someone who does not need to prove his strength because it is evident in everything he does. This kind of strength is not just respected, it is necessary for living a meaningful and successful life. Kindness is often misunderstood. People frequently mistake it for compliance, for passivity, for an unwillingness to assert oneself in the face of opposition. This is particularly true for men who have not yet grasped the deeper meaning of strength. They assume that being agreeable, avoiding conflict, and always putting others before themselves will earn them respect and admiration. But this is not kindness, it is submission. It is a survival strategy, a way of avoiding rejection, a method of seeking validation through the approval of others. And the world, especially women, can see through this. People instinctively know when kindness is coming from a place of fear rather than a place of confidence, and they do not respect it. A man who is kind because he is afraid of conflict, because he does not want to upset others, because he cannot tolerate disapproval, is not truly kind. He is simply yielding. He is attempting to keep the peace by sacrificing his own needs, by making himself smaller, by ensuring that he does not challenge or inconvenience anyone. This is not the kindness of a strong man, it is the compliance of a weak one. And when kindness is driven by fear rather than strength, it does not inspire respect, it inspires disdain. People sense that the person extending kindness in this way is not doing so out of genuine goodwill, but out of self-preservation. They know that this person would rather be agreeable than stand up for themselves, and this paradoxically makes them trust that person less. A man who lacks strength but tries to be kind often finds himself being taken advantage of. He is too afraid to set boundaries, too unwilling to say no, too desperate for approval to assert himself. He believes that by always being accommodating, he will be loved and valued. But the reality is that people do not respect those who do not respect themselves. If a man cannot enforce his own boundaries, if he cannot push back against unfair treatment, if he cannot say what he truly thinks, then his kindness is not kindness at all. It is submission. And submission, when it is not freely chosen, breeds resentment. It fosters a deep internal frustration, a sense of being unappreciated, of being used, of being invisible. A man who gives and gives without ever demanding anything in return does not inspire gratitude, he inspires indifference. Women, in particular, have an innate ability to detect weakness. They can tell when a man is being kind because he wants to be, and when he is being kind because he is afraid of not being liked. A man who is too eager to please, who never disagrees, who suppresses his own thoughts and desires to avoid upsetting a woman is not seen as noble. He is seen as lacking a backbone, and this lack of strength is profoundly unattractive. Women respect men who are kind because they choose to be, not because they have no other option. They respect men who can be compassionate without being spineless, who can be generous without being naive, who can be patient without being passive. Kindness from a place of strength is an entirely different matter. A strong man is kind because he chooses to be, not because he is compelled to be. His kindness is not a survival strategy, it is a moral choice. He is capable of being firm, of standing his ground, of asserting his needs and opinions, but he also recognizes the value of empathy, of generosity, of treating others with dignity. His kindness is not a weakness, it is a conscious decision, one rooted in confidence rather than fear. And because his kindness is authentic, it is respected. People do not see him as someone who is trying to earn their approval. They see him as someone who simply understands the value of decency. A strong man's kindness is also backed by boundaries. He does not allow others to take advantage of him. He is not a doormat. He helps when he can, but he does not sacrifice his own well-being for the sake of people who do not appreciate it. He understands that kindness does not mean allowing himself to be exploited, and he is willing to walk away from situations where his generosity is not respected. This ability to enforce boundaries makes his kindness even more valuable because it signals that he is not kind out of necessity, but out of choice. And people, including women, respect this deeply. They recognize that his kindness is something real, something deliberate, something that comes from an internal sense of strength rather than a desperate need for external approval. Another crucial aspect of kindness from strength is that it is not performative. Weak men often use kindness as a tool to get something in return. They are nice because they want validation, because they expect appreciation, because they believe it will make people like them. But real kindness does not seek anything in return. It is not a transaction. A strong man does not extend kindness because he is trying to manipulate others into liking him. He extends kindness because he believes in its value, because he understands that being compassionate does not make him weak. It makes him honorable. And this makes all the difference in how people perceive him. People are naturally drawn to those who are both strong and kind because that combination represents true stability. Strength without kindness is tyranny, kindness without strength is servitude. But when a man possesses both, he becomes someone who is not only capable of defending himself, but also capable of uplifting others. He is someone who can be relied upon, someone who is stable and trustworthy, someone who is not ruled by fear, but by principle. This kind of man earns respect, admiration, and loyalty, not because he demands it, but because he naturally commands it through his actions. In relationships, this dynamic is especially important. Women want to feel safe with a man, and safety is not just about physical protection, it is about emotional stability. A man who is too passive, too eager to please, too unwilling to assert himself, does not provide a sense of security. He seems unreliable, unpredictable, weak. But a man who is both strong and kind offers the best of both worlds. He is capable of standing his ground, of making difficult decisions, of leading when necessary, but he is also compassionate, understanding, and supportive. This balance is rare and it is profoundly attractive. One of the most overlooked aspects of strength is that it allows for greater kindness. A weak man has limits on how kind he can be because he is constantly worried about being taken advantage of, about not receiving anything in return, about being seen as weak. His kindness is conditional because it comes from a place of insecurity. A strong man, on the other hand, does not worry about these things. He knows that he is capable of enforcing his boundaries, that he is not afraid of confrontation, that he does not need external validation. Because of this, he is able to be truly kind, without fear, without resentment, without hidden motives. When kindness comes from strength, it is not submission, it is a form of power. It is the ability to extend goodwill without being naive, to be generous without being exploited, to be compassionate without being weak. It is the kind of kindness that is respected, that inspires admiration, that makes a man someone who others look up to rather than look down upon. It is the kind of kindness that makes a difference, not because it is an act of desperation, but because it is an act of true character. In the end, the world does not reward those who are kind out of fear. It rewards those who are kind out of choice. It respects those who are strong enough to be kind without losing themselves in the process. It values those who are both tough and compassionate, who can fight when necessary but who prefer to build rather than destroy. And this is what every man should strive for, not to be agreeable, not to be submissive, not to be a people pleaser, but to be strong enough to be kind, in a way that commands respect rather than seeks approval. Strength is not something that simply appears in a person's character. It is not an innate quality that some people are born with while others are destined to go without. Strength is built. It is cultivated over time through effort, through hardship, through discipline, through resilience, and most importantly through taking responsibility for one's life. A weak person does not become strong by accident. They do not suddenly wake up one day with the ability to face adversity, to withstand pressure, to carry burdens without breaking. Strength is the result of a deliberate process. It is forged in the fire of experience, of struggle, of overcoming obstacles rather than avoiding them. It is earned through discipline, through daily actions that move a person forward, even when those actions are difficult, even when the results are not immediately apparent. Strength is the consequence of choosing to take responsibility for one's life rather than waiting for someone else to do it. Discipline is the foundation upon which strength is built. Without discipline, there is no progress. Without discipline, there is no ability to resist temptation, to endure discomfort, to persist in the face of difficulty. A person who lacks discipline is at the mercy of their impulses, of their fleeting emotions, of their momentary desires. They are unable to make the hard choices that lead to long-term success because they are constantly giving in to whatever feels easy, whatever feels pleasurable, whatever allows them to avoid discomfort in the short term. But strength requires the ability to act not based on what feels good in the moment, but on what is necessary for growth. Discipline means doing the things that need to be done even when they are unpleasant, even when they are difficult, even when there is no immediate reward. It means showing up every day, pushing forward, putting in the work, regardless of how one feels. A disciplined person understands that progress is not always linear. Some days are easier than others. Some days feel like failure, but they continue anyway. They do not allow themselves to be ruled by their emotions. They do not wait for motivation to strike before they act. They act first and they let motivation follow. This is how strength is built, by doing what is necessary, by making sacrifices, by maintaining focus when others would give up. A disciplined man does not make excuses. He does not blame external circumstances for his lack of progress. He does not look for someone else to take responsibility for his failures. He owns his actions. He understands that his life is a reflection of his choices, and if he wants something to change, it is up to him to change it. Resilience is another essential pillar of strength. No one who is truly strong has had an easy life. Strength is not the absence of struggle. It is the ability to endure struggle and come out stronger on the other side. A person who has never faced hardship has no reason to be strong. They have never had to dig deep to find out what they are truly capable of, to confront their own limitations and push beyond them. Resilience is built through experience, through failure, through rejection, through pain. It is built by standing back up after being knocked down, by refusing to let setbacks define one's future, by choosing to keep moving forward even when everything seems to be against them. A resilient person understands that failure is not the end, it is a lesson. It is an opportunity for growth. The weak are destroyed by failure. They take it as proof that they are incapable, that they are unworthy, that they should give up. But the strong see failure as a necessary step on the path to success. They learn from it. They adapt. They refine their approach. They do not let one defeat turn into permanent defeat. They understand that the road to strength is paved with challenges, and those challenges are not obstacles, they are necessary tests. They are what separates those who truly want to be strong from those who only wish they were. Taking responsibility for one's life is perhaps the most important aspect of strength. There is no strength in blaming others, in making excuses, in waiting for external circumstances to change before taking action. Strength comes from the understanding that no one is coming to save you. No one is responsible for your success except you. The moment a person accepts this truth is the moment they begin to take control of their life. They stop looking for someone else to fix their problems. They stop resenting the world for their struggles. They stop waiting for the perfect conditions before taking action. They take ownership of their life, of their choices, of their failures and their successes. A person who refuses to take responsibility for their life will never be strong. They will always be at the mercy of their circumstances, always dependent on others, always looking for someone to blame when things do not go their way. But a strong person understands that even if something is not their fault, it is still their responsibility. They do not waste time complaining about unfairness, about bad luck, about things beyond their control. They focus on what they can do, on what they can change, on how they can improve. And through this mindset, they become unshakable. They become someone who is not easily thrown off course, who does not crumble under pressure, who does not retreat in the face of difficulty. They become someone who is capable of leading, of building, of inspiring others, not because they were born with some special gift, but because they made the choice to be strong. Strength is not about pretending to be invulnerable. It is not about never feeling fear, never feeling pain, never facing doubt. Strength is about facing those things head on and refusing to let them dictate one's actions. A strong person experiences fear but does not allow it to control them. They feel pain but do not let it break them. They encounter doubt, but do not let it stop them. They understand that true strength is not the absence of struggle, it is the ability to persist despite struggle. A man who builds strength through discipline, resilience, and responsibility does not need to prove himself to others. He does not need external validation. He does not need constant reassurance. He is secure in himself because he knows that he has earned his strength through effort and perseverance. He does not need to boast about his abilities or seek approval from those around him. His actions speak for themselves. He is the type of person that others respect, not because he demands it, but because it is impossible not to respect someone who embodies true strength. Women in particular are drawn to men who possess this kind of strength, not because of superficial displays of power or dominance, but because true strength creates security. A man who has discipline, who is resilient, who takes responsibility for his life, is a man who can be relied upon. He is not easily shaken. He does not crumble under pressure. He does not run from challenges. And this is what makes him attractive. Not just in a romantic sense, but in a broader, more fundamental way. People want to be around those who are strong, because strength is rare and it is valuable. It is something that others seek out because it represents stability, reliability, and confidence. Those who lack strength often resent those who have it. They call discipline unnecessary, resilience overrated, responsibility oppressive. But this is simply an excuse to justify weakness. The truth is that strength requires effort, and many people would rather avoid that effort. But avoidance does not make them strong. It only ensures that they remain weak. The only way to build strength is through action, through making difficult choices, through pushing forward when it would be easier to quit, through taking ownership of one's life rather than expecting someone else to do it. Strength is not a gift. It is not something that one is born with or without. It is something that is built through years of effort, of struggle, of perseverance. It is something that is earned. And once it is earned, it cannot be taken away. A strong person does not lose their strength because of one failure, one rejection, one moment of weakness. They continue, they grow, they push forward, and in doing so they become unbreakable. Strength is not something that is given, it is something that is earned. It is built through discipline, through resilience, through the acceptance of responsibility. A weak person remains weak, not because they lack potential, but because they refuse to do the hard work necessary to grow. Strength does not come from avoiding hardship, but from confronting it, from standing up to challenges rather than retreating. Those who embrace discipline, who persist through struggle, who take responsibility for their lives will find that they become the kind of person who commands respect, both from themselves and from others. Strength is not about arrogance or dominance. It is about stability, confidence, and the ability to navigate life with purpose and conviction. And in the end, that is what truly sets apart those who succeed from those who falter. The willingness to endure, to grow, and to take control of one's own destiny.